Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new show of Sathology, Debunking Mythology. Our endeavor is to talk on different subjects and topics and try to discover what is the background. Some of you who are into Hindu studies and research the topic of Ganga, Jamuna, Tehzeebi, not Tablighi. Tablighi is a terrorist organization with Tehzeebi. And then you come across this term a lot. So today we have a very wonderful person. Uh, he's part of Indic Academy and very good speaker. You have many videos you can see of his on the YouTube channels, and he has been working on the ground on those topics, educating people. And he'll also try to educate us on what is this Ganga Jamuna Tehzeebi, which is mentioned by many people, many writers. I think it's probably the origins we're going to talk about. Where did it come from? And Ganga Jamuna is very revered by all the spiritualists in America. I think so many Americans know about Ganga more than any other river on the world, including their own American rivers. And some of them know about Yamuna more than anyone else because Krishna was there and Varanasi is on the bank of Ganga. So what is this? The Urdu word, which is Farsi, Tehzeebi, and got attached to it. Is it, the many backgrounds to it is just connotations. Connotations are much deeper in denotations. Tehzeeb just means manners in Urdu. But what is that? Why an Urdu word has been added to Ganga in Jamuna? So let us talk to this great personality. Let us welcome Vikas Saraswatji. Namaskar.
Namaskar, Namaskar Aditya ji. I'm glad to connect with the Satyology and happy to speak to all of you. Come to know the kind of work what you are doing there, and it is very important what you are doing there, busting all what goes in the name of mythology actually. And in place, you have used the term Satyology, which is truthology if one were to translate it into English. So fantastic work, and I'm looking forward to this talk. Some useful engagement, and if I can provide my perspective, I actually come from an area which should fall in the geographic domains of Ganga and Jamuna Tehzeeb, because I am on the banks of Yamuna. My native city is Agra, and my ancestors all came from Mathura district. So I'm as strong a resident of the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb as one could be. But let us see what it actually signifies. Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, what it actually signifies.
So Sat means truth and Logos means it's a Latin word. It means science. Just the way Europeans use myth, which is Sanskrit word, and connected Logos, which is science. So science of myth is science of Sat, which is science of truth. So it's the same thing.
Very
Science of
nice.
truth or study of truth.
Very
So
nice.
so very it's a true antonym of mythology because myth is a Sanskrit word, Sat is a Sanskrit word.
Absolutely.
Sanskrit, logos, Latin. So when you say Satology means science of truth. So coming back to, since you live in Agra, and everybody, for the viewers, I must tell you, and not for the Indian viewers, क्योंकि आपको सबको मालूम है, you all know that आगरा में ताजमहल है, and ताजमहल पे mythology पे अलग बात कर सकते हैं, what is the mythology of ताजमहल. But before we begin, and I think it's an icon for India. When any American wants to come to India, means the first question is, did you visit Taj Mahal? And that's what people talk about. But later on, so first of all, we'll just focus on this concept and deep connotations it has. It has been used politically or misused politically, and but it's in simple terms, it just means that mannerisms of Ganga Jamuna. So, sir, can you please elaborate, Vikasji, what is
Uh,
Ganga Jamuna culture, first of all,
okay.
and then how this word Tehzeebi distorts the entire culture? Hopefully,
Right.
am I right?
Yeah. So Aditya ji, it is quite obvious whenever two cultures intersect anywhere, they will have some kind of an influence on each other. Say like a substantial number of Chinese people move to some other area, they will bring with them one kind of food, one kind of attire, and one kind of language. And in due course, we will have influence on the place where they have come. So this keeps happening, and I would grant, although the proponents of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb would like us to believe that there existed no culture or no civilization in northern part of India, and everything was brought by the uh, Muslim invaders who came first from Arabia, then from Central Asia, and then Persia, and in later stages from Afghanistan as well. But that's not quite the case. So what we are told in the name of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb is that they are evolved in these plains in between these two rivers. That region is basically called the Doab region, a distinct kind of culture which was an assimilation of Islamic and Hindu values. Before we begin with Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, let us also ponder upon one important point, which is that why don't we have, say, Jhelum or Byas Tehzeeb? Why don't we have Satluj or Indus Tehzeeb? Or why don't we have Byas or Ravi Tehzeeb? See, the influx started from the west part of India only. And those who are aware with the geography of India, they know that the Muslim invaders came from that region. But why there is no such tehzeebs, as I mentioned? Because there are no Hindus left over there. So it's a very significant point. There are no Hindus there. Whatever was there has been absorbed by Islam. Now you come to this part. By some chance of luck, or we can say that some resistance was offered from the Hindu side, that Hindus persisted, Hindu continued to be in that place. And so it is quite obvious that some culinary influence would be there. There would be some influence on the attire also. I grant all of that. There are people who say, like, because biryani, as you would recall, biryani is taunt to be one of the influences, one of the symbols of Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. Now there are people who say that wherever these Muslim invaders were coming from, Central Asia or Afghanistan or Iran or Arabia, wherever, there was no rice. So how did they know how to cook biryani? It's a very, very valid point. But I am granting all of them because there is some influence will always be there. The use of spices, probably garlic was not used too much in our houses. So I grant that much. Attire, men's attire, basically there is no reciprocation. Hindu men have taken the Muslim attire, but Muslim people didn't take the Hindu attire. Okay, women, surely the Muslim women did start wearing sari and other kind of things. So that culinary influences and that attire and all that, if you can call that as a tehzeeb or a culture, that's fine. But is it, that's not what the proponents of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb mean by it. They actually mean that it is a culture of syncretism and accommodation, assimilation. So does it happen? That is the point actually to see. Now we'll come to a few aspects of this Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb in the historical perspective. I'll take up few things one by one. First is the language. See, for a long time, up till the Mughals remained here in India, they had their court language as only Persian. Many of them had learned the local languages, but they didn't make those languages as their court languages. They kept to Persian. Persian only was the court language up till the last of the Mughal emperors. Now, another aspect of this Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb is the poetry, the Urdu poetry. And here there is something very interesting to it. All of this Ganga Jamuni poetry is either associated with Sufi poetry, Sufi songs, or some random Urdu shairi. what is it all about? If you see, there is a distinct pattern to this poetry. All of it is associated with a few themes which are like idolatry, non-believers, and at every step, the kafir, who is the non-believer, idolater who worships idols, or polytheists, the mushriks, they are played down upon. Even when the poet is indulging with the non-believer, he is saying, okay, I grant you this much, I concede you this much, even when you are a kafir. So very clearly, the non-believer is in the secondary stage. He's on the secondary status. This is a very important aspect. This Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb has influenced our Bollywood film industry also, and you see the kind of songs which come up from there. All those songs also have this kind of an imagery. They continuously keep up coming with kafir and but shikan and but and all that, and all of that comes in derogatory forms only. There is a very legendary poet, Amir Khusro. He has a poem called Chhap Tilak Sab Chini To Se Naina Milake, and which is sung like on every cultural occasion which celebrates this Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. And what is it all about? Chhap Tilak Sab Chini is basically a song which says that the non-believing women, by a mere glance of the Sufi saint Nizamuddin, has left her religion. So it is all about like that, converting Hindus to Islam, running them down, deriding them, and that is quite mainstream. And there is no movement in the opposite direction. So like there are no Muslims who are reverential towards the Hindu gods or the Hindu practices. That's the poetry aspect. Say now, a lot is said about these Mughal emperors and how syncretic, accepting for they say no, Aurangzeb was an aberration. But how these other Mughals were behaving? I'll come to something like interpersonal relationships, in which marriage is a very important thing. All through the medieval history, you will see these marriages were the inter-religious marriages. They were only one way. The Muslim ruler, the Muslim king would marry a Hindu lady. The reverse never happened. There is just one instant amongst this 500, 700 year history where Akbar is supposed to have offered his daughter, which the Rajputs didn't accept. That's just one-off case. Excepting that, there is no Muslim girl marrying into the Hindus. So see this. Then naming of the places. How do they name the places? A lot of them, particularly Akbar, is said that he was very kind with the Hindus and all. But even Akbar did not name any one single place where he founded his cities or cantonments as a Hindu city. No name, no Hindu name he has given. So this is one thing. Then you will see in the name of this Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, you will see a lot of Hindus keep flocking the dargahs. A lot of them sing this kind of poetry what I was just mentioning. But reverse is never the case. You will never see a Muslim coming and praying at Hindu places of worships. The prime failure of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb was the reluctance, or rather vehemence, with which the Muslim side opposed the handing over of Ram Janmabhoomi. Everyone in India understands the importance of Ram Janmabhoomi, and in opposition to, there was like all sorts of evidence there, but the other side was reluctant, or rather they were vehemently opposed to giving up the claim over Ram Janmabhoomi. Overwhelming evidence, the importance of Ram Janmabhoomi for the Hindus, but nothing deterred them. There was no Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb to be seen there. There was no concession to be made. So in sum, this is your Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. And as I said, see, we don't hear about the Satluj in the Tehzeeb or Tigris Euphrates Tehzeeb, because they are not there. They have been completely overrun by Islam.
So you made some very good opening remarks and gave us a lot of background on that. So what I see here is, if you study from the sociology point of view or history point of view, then it's more of a conquest mindset, invading mindset, and destroying the culture, which is the culture of India. And I would say that Pakistan and Bangladesh also have the Hindu culture,
Yes.
because, and one area I would say that they have also adopted our dresses. They may have made it looser, but pajama kurta is traditionally Indian,
Yes.
and they have also adopted and made it loose, look like a frock, but generally it is like that. If you look at the history, and I would go a little bit back, the pre-Islamic period, then there was a very vibrant uh, Hindu culture or Indus culture or Vedic culture in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which I till date regard as a Hindu country, because you cannot eliminate. I mean, they've done their best they could to destroy the temples and destroy the Hindu places of worship and violated Hindu women. All kinds of things they have done in the name of religion, but this culture still remains. I mean, the way they think. I mean, the thought process is still Hindu, and
Very
even though
true.
it's filled with hatred of their original people, but still is Hindu. And when the Persia got invaded by Islamic invaders from mostly Sunnis, mostly Ummah dynasty and all this Ummad dynasty, they were all Zoroastrians. They were not, and Zoroastrians are nothing but extension of Hindus. They were worshipping fire, and the out of the hatred of the invading Ummad forces, they created a new Islam, Persian Islam, called Ajam Islam, and
Yes.
that was the worst, that was the most violent form of Islam that attacked Kashmir when Lalit Aditya II was ruling. And from there, it started coming south, and then the Uzbekis, Baburs, and other people came in, and untold miseries, untold violence. And still, the people of India or the Hindus accepted them part of their culture. Was it a weakness or a strength?
Uh, See, there were episodes where the Hindus retaliated, but it was fundamentally a difference of value system. So, like I have seen a lot of Pakistanis also openly confess that it was not the Hindu value system to attack a fleeing enemy, somebody who is without arms, who is not armed properly. So the Hindus were reluctant there. In fact, now there is a very interesting episode when Aurangzeb was about to hand over power to his sons. He called all three of them and he said that you keep these Hindus as your chieftains, you have them in your army, but never entrust them with something like governorship or very high posts. Reason being, see, these people are the Rajputs. Basically, he was speaking about the Rajputs. He says, no, in their code of honor, it is not in them to flee. And in the in military science, in the art of battle, in the art of warfare, a person should know when and where to flee also. So he said no, and this was not a Hindu trait. It is just one Hindu trait I am mentioning. So it's not as if that we were not courageous. We have seen, like, once we came to know what Islam meant, we started offering them resistance. And Shivaji Maharaj to Chhatrasal Bundela, there are a lot of heroes actually. With very small armies, they gave very tough fight to the Mughals. So probably it was because of the value system, and it took a lot of time for us. We never thought that the practice called dharma, which is there in amongst us, no, in all our spheres, we have a battle field dharma also. So it could be violated in such a manner. It didn't occur to us. I think it was the defeat of that.
Now, you mentioned now a very good point about dharma, and brings me to the point also the Rajput value system, which comes from Bhagavad Gita, very clearly mentioned, Yudhya Palayanam. One of
Yeah.
the qualities of a Kshatriya is to not run away from the
Not to
battlefield
run away. Yes,
and
yes,
not
yes,
to
yes.
show the back. And I think
Correct,
that is
correct.
ingrained in the culture of Hindus, and that's why they are one of the best fighters,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recognized by the US military also.
Yes.
US military has a doctrine of not fighting with the Indian army. Did you know that? They don't want
Oh,
to
no,
fight with the
I
Indian
didn't know
army.
that.
Yes.
Okay,
It's a
okay,
doctrine
okay.
not to fight with the Indian army. That's a doctrine in the US military. It's
Very
not
nice.
because they can not defeat or they cannot fight with them, but the point is that they will never give up.
Very nice.
So because they learned from the British Army, because British Army has a record in World War One and World War Two, that if it was not for the Indian contingents of British Army, they would not have ruled the world.
Very nice.
And World War One, Ottoman Empire, that's where 1914. That's where the crown had just taken over the Indian army, and under the Indian army was the one who actually destroyed Ottoman Empire, which
Fantastic.
is Turkey. And
Yeah.
till date, Turkey hates India for that because the only army which Turkish ever are scared of is Indian army.
Indian Army.
And there was a big incident of revolt also, and you can see World War One Indian troops walking in Paris, and there's a big victory
True.
parade where they're being honored. And till date, I think some of the Indian ministers did honor Indian soldiers in World War One. So that's the history of Yudhecha
Yeah.
Palayanam.
And we all know about Prithviraj Chauhan, how he forgave his enemy for 15, 16 times only to be attacked the 17th time. No, so that is the Hindu value system basically,
no,
and
I
we took a
think
long time.
that we should question now, because the thing is, it's very clear from the Chandragupta Maurya and Chanakya association that we have to understand the enemy's mindset first.
Absolutely,
And if the
absolutely.
enemy's mindset is to conquer, then the tactics and strategies play a major role. Sometimes you
Yeah,
have to retreat, but you cannot give up. You have to keep going
you
on
cannot
with
do.
them. Now, coming back
True,
to
true.
Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb,
Yes.
what are the deeper connotations of it? How has he affected or weakened? And you also mentioned the Bollywood angle to it, that how Bollywood has used this to still continue the same propaganda of the Islamic invaders.
So, yeah. So now there are certain aspects to the this Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, which are like praise the Mughal architecture, but keep quiet on thousands of destroyed Hindu temples. That is one aspect of it. Okay, go to Qawwali concerts or all these Sufi concerts and whatever concerts are there. Go to the dargahs, but do not even expect the other party to take part in your cultural affairs. Say, I'm not speaking about the ritualistic affairs. I'm just speaking about the cultural affairs. In this respect, no, Aditya you would know that every now and then we have a problem on the Holi celebration in India. Every Holi there will be some fight and riots saying that no, some Muslim chap was going and the Hindu boys, in some cases these will be very young kids, 10-year, 12-year-old kids. No, last year I think in Farrukhabad or somewhere, a boy was killed. Some 14, 15-year-old boy was killed because these two boys were playing and accidentally some color fell on a Muslim fellow. So this is what the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb actually is. And you would remember that Surf Excel ad also. There was an advertisement which made quite a furor in India, which was like a very small girl and a small boy. Small boy is a Muslim boy. He's in his kurta pajama, white and white with the skull cap. Probably, I mean, whether he's going for prayers or not, it is not clear from the advertisement. But he's passing his way, and then some small kids are about to throw color on that boy, and a Hindu girl comes, small Hindu girl comes and saves that boy from being colored by the other people. Now you see the underlying message over here. I mean, where is the Ganga Jamuna? It's a small child's mindset. It would be like playful, no? So many boys are playing color. There is a chance that he could also play. In the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, you could have also portrayed that boy as fancying or as wishing that somebody colors him. No, but here that boy's dress should not be colored. Not even a single drop of that color should come on it. And the way that Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb is saved is by that girl, that small girl, taking her away on the bicycle. So this is the crux of that. All the accommodation has to be made from one side. And on what terms? The other side's terms are unbending, unrelenting. Only the Hindu has to make concessions. So it is basically an apologetic Hindu accommodating Islam on Islam's terms, firmly on Islam's terms. So, and there are some episodes which are like in this whole entire Ganga Jamuna kind of thing. No, there will be one or two instances. We had Rahim or Ras Khan who have written some poetry about Lord Krishna. We had, I'm not very sure because there are contradicting reports to it, but I'm told that Hasrat Mohani, one gentleman in prior to independence, a leading Muslim scholar, he used to go to Mathura Brindavan, but on every Krishna Janmashtami. But these are episodes now which keep appearing once in 50 years, once in 100 years. They are not a trend actually. They are not the general drift. These are aberrations. On the basis of those aberrations, you can't conclude that this is a Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. For the Tehzeeb, no, it has to be a wider accommodation, a two-way accommodation on some kind of a substantial scale. So presently, as we were speaking about Bollywood, Urduized Bollywood, that is the epitome of our Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. From India, I don't think anybody in the West or even in Indian crowd, amongst the Indian people, anyone would know some leading folk singers, folk artists. That is the extent. So this is the truth about the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb. You hail Muslim invaders for bringing culture to India, okay, but label all talk of ancient Hindu knowledge systems and practices as being retrograde, as being communal. So this is the truth of it. I frankly, for one or two people, one or two honest people from the other side, I haven't seen much of this Ganga Jamuna here living in this part of India.
Would you say that, I mean, based on how you're describing it, would you say that Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb is a racist idea?
It's an artificial construct, I would say. I wouldn't say that it's a racist kind of a thing, because racially speaking, more or less, most of the Muslims too are from the same region only. They are converts. But it's a very frivolous kind of a thing. If I were to give an American analogy, I would say, okay, the Americans say, okay, we have Chinook helicopters. Okay, we have a Pocahontas portrait on the rotund of the Capitol Hill. So we had very good relations with the Red Americans. It is that kind of an artificial construct, I would say, Aditya-ji.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the American history, the Native Americans were completely destroyed by the European settlers. They wiped out almost 100 million Native Americans, and now, and until 1971, they did not have the right.
Right.
So 1961 or 62, they were first given the rights to vote. And until 1991, most of the Native Americans were given Christianity as an option. They were not even considered humans. So 1924, they were first given they were accepted as American citizens. Did you imagine that? Like European settlers invading their land, and they got the first right to vote in 1924. In 1961, they were recognized to practice their own faith connected with the church only. And 1971 and 1991 that's where they were recognized, and the US Congress passed a law to protect their culture. Today also, only 5 million Native Americans are left, who are hardly very Christianized now. So
But imagine somebody saying no, but the bald eagle, which is the American symbol, came from the Iroquois nation, so we had very good relations. This is the equivalent of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb for Americans. for all the oppression and all the misery which the Red Indians have suffered, which you just mentioned.
So if we continue the same example, like I said, when the Islam as a religion as is conquered the Persia, which was a Indian territory, Hindu territory, and Parsik is the name in Mahabharata. Parsik. The word Parsi comes from Mahabharata, Sanskrit word. Now,
Absolutely.
now if we compare that conquest, I would say it was a military conquest actually. Persia was militarily conquered, and they continued to Afghanistan and then Pakistan, and so these are all parts of India: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh.
True.
Would you feel that if this concept of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb continues, then Hindus will come in the museum? What has happened in
Surely, yeah, because this is an opium actually. Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb is the opium, which finally now, no, in its more fundamentalist form, manifests in the principle or the ideology called secularism now here in India. Here also in secularism, as in the Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, all the concessions are made to be only one side. There is nothing incumbent. There are no demands on the other side. All that has to be all that what one has to do. I mean, all the concessions what one person has to make is from one side alone. So it is like that, and you know where it will lead. I'll give you a two three examples if Aditya, if we still have time. What this has actually led to here in the Ganga Jamuna belt. Uh, See, from the mixed population areas, you will know there are certain mixed population areas in every old city, old town, whether it is Aligarh or Meerut or Kanpur. No, the migration from these places is only of one community, which is the Hindus. The other community never migrates. The migration has just not happened from Kashmir alone. Within this Ganga Jamuna belt, or rather from anywhere in India, you will see wherever the mixed population areas are there, only the Hindus migrate. Coming to the cross community crime, a lot has been made now about mob lynching, this and that, but there is a lot which goes unreported. Immediately after the lockdown, which is say like 3-4 months back, there are at least 10 to 20 cases where Hindus have been killed by the Muslims. So why I am mentioning this cross community crime, that cross community crime also has one dimension where only one community is the victim, other communities is the aggressor. Once in a while, no, after say 100 Hindus being killed one by one, which all go unreported, one Muslim gets killed and there is a halla right up to Washington Post and Huffington Post. This is the truth of Ganga. On the other side, Hindus keep getting killed. Hindu ladies keep getting murdered. I mean, including those ladies who marry the Muslim men and finally end up killed in some kind of a body bag and all that. With that, I also want to add that marriages are also a one-way traffic only. It's always, even now, it's not just the Mughal times where the Muslim emperors or the Muslim kings used to marry Hindu princesses. Even today, you will see if there are 95, 99 cases of Muslim men marrying Hindu women, there might be just one case the other way around. So these are certain facts. This is where it has led. And as you said, then where it will ultimately lead to, it is anybody's guess.
No, good point. I think the Ganga Jamuna can there be like this word has been glorified by some politicians also, and you know who I'm referring to, Sonia Antonio Maino Gandhi. So she has also glorified it, and there is another politician called Ahmed Patel who has also glorified it, and I see that happening again and again and again in many parts of the world. It's the same formula everywhere.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's the same formula. It's like a global conspiracy. But
Absolutely.
from our education purely point of view, wasn't there like from your part of you are living in the same belt, And wasn't from our community point of view, did we try to do a reverse for this? Like, for example, Hindu boys, Hindu community leaders making a concession that they can also accept Muslim women into their families. Is there something happened socially as well to counter?
Aditya ji, I am very sorry to say, excepting for West Bengal, where there was this gentleman Tapan Ghosh running his Hindu Samhati. He was a person who said, no, okay. I mean, I am saying apart from the Arya Samaj, and Arya Samaj also is not the same Arya Samaj which it used to be 70, 80, 100 years back. There are, of course, some organizations like Agniveer which are doing a fantastic job. Other than that, there was just one, this Hindu Samati, Mr. Tapan Ghosh, who used to offer all kind of support to these boys. He said, no, if anybody has married a Muslim woman, I am there to protect you. I will offer you all kind of protection, and I'll see to it that no harm comes to you. Because like how it happens on the Hindu side, the first thing, if a Hindu girl marries a Hindu Muslim boy, the first thing that the Hindu parents do is that they throw up their hands. They say, no, we don't have anything to do with you. You go wherever you have went. You have brought disrepute to us, dishonor to us, so we will not do anything about it. But the other side is very persistent. I know cases where even after 10 years of marriage, the Muslim girls have been dragged away. They have been taken away forcibly from the marriages. So there is a challenge what you mentioned, and to the best of my knowledge, only this one gentleman was there who was willing to take on that challenge and offer protection to these kind of boys.
So, what you're saying is like Tapan Ghosh is sort of a pioneer, but isn't that from the Ganga, Jamuna, Tehzeeb belt, Doab region, which you're saying? Wasn't there a local counter to this ideology?
There are a few organizations like Dharma Raksha Samiti, Hindu Janjagriti Samiti. A few organizations are there. In their small pockets, they try to do the limited amount of work what they can, but it's not a very broad trend. No, like the trend which you mentioned. No, in the beginning you said something about Tabligh. So Tabligh out and out as an Islamist ideology, it rather like motivates the Muslim boys to go after. And it's quite a phenomena actually. If anybody visits the Indian colleges, particularly the women's college or even women's school, America, you have a different format. No, you call your colleges as schools, and that way. Here in school means like where the youngsters go, and the college is for the higher studies. So in either case, wherever the women's college or women's schools are there, you would find a lot of Muslim boys loitering around. Many a times, they would have that Hindu thread around their wrists, tied around their wrists. That is all to fool these girls. And when they are emotionally attached to them, 3 months, 6 months later, they would reveal their true identity. And by that time, the girl is so emotionally involved, that's what we call the love jihad kind of a phenomenon. And it is promoted with a design. The local Maulvi is into it, big organizations are into it, and now you have actually centers in Kerala. It has come to knowledge that there is this PFI and SDPI, whose role was there in the CA and NRC protests also. They run proper centers for that. This is basically an ideology of Dawa, because you know a lot about it. Dawa is basically an Islamist ideology which seeks conversions, proactive conversions, and anybody who is into Dawa, it is believed that merit accrues to him. He'll get Jannat, he will get a higher place in heaven. So they do it that way. But on the other side, it is not so organized. Maybe some 1-2 disparate organizations or people doing it on their own.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think the education levels of Hindus is generally very high. And the education system, you very aptly mentioned the secularism that you described. So, well, the secularism was a British term which was designed to separate the state from the church, because church had so many atrocities that
Yes.
they had to remove church, because earlier, if you look at the history of Christianity, then the church was heavily involved in toppling kingdoms. And so they had to, in order for a government to freely function for the benefit of the people, they had to invent this term to separate the two. But in India, secularism has taken totally different meaning.
Absolutely.
It has
Yes.
become a sort of denying any non-Abrahamic follower of any non-Abrahamic faith their
Yes.
rights.
Yes.
And the laws are also like that. You know, there are many
Yes.
laws in India which are very discriminatory towards Hindus,
Discriminatory.
even
True.
today.
True. True. Absolutely.
Even
Absolutely.
today. And even though
Yeah.
when there is a so-called Hindu government, but still the laws work against them. So
Absolutely.
is and due to which this kind of ideology is actually promoted in a way.
Absolutely.
And the
And
schools, the law enforcement, the judges, the justices, the local judge, law system that you have in India is all guided by these principles. So there is one community, even though they are the majority, they are discriminated. I think India is the first case where the minority religions overpower the majority religion. And this
absolutely.
is, when an American thinks, and many of them are watching now, and they think that something needs to be done by the people there. So, what is your view on that?
No, very rightly pointed out. The problem with this majority minority construct is, no, first of all, secularism. Secularism is basically, it is not an Indian idea. And India was never in need of secularism because the division between the temporal and the worldly powers was quite distinct right from the beginning. The priest would not have any influence on the kingly affairs, the administrative affairs, and likewise the king would never interfere in the spiritual matters or the religious matters. So we never had this need actually. Even then, no, this secularism was foisted upon us, where we are given two meanings of secularism. One was the Anglo-Saxon definition, which said, no, okay, equality, that is sarvodharma, equal respect for every religion. And the French definition, which was that no, the religion should itself have nothing to do with your administration or government. In neither case it fits into the Indian understanding of secularism, what we practice here. Coming from there, the second aspect, I forgot what you were speaking about. Uh,
What is the, like, since the government is a
ah,
majority run, and
Majority and minority. I think Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he has a very interesting saying. He says that a small minority, which is obdurate, insistent, violent, it can bring to knees a far bigger majority also. This keeps happening. I think I don't know from where we have got this idea of majority minority construct. Probably uh, on when both the sides are equally violent, both the sides are ready to fight in the name of the religion, then this makes sense. India, it has never had a history of Hindus fighting in the name of Hindu Dharma to establish Hindu religion or Hindu Dharma in other areas. It's never been the case. West has had its crusades. Islam has had like far more than the crusades. All of the success to Islam owes to their sword, the might of sword of Islam, as they openly proclaim also. So it was never our case. And this majority minority construct, it becomes even more flawed in Indian context. 90 or 80 people in Hindus are, we have around 80% of the population as Hindus,
more than
and
that.
14, yeah, so 79, now it has come below 80, and now we have only 14-15% Muslims. But that Muslim veto is there on every single governmental agenda, whether it is day-to-day administration or any policy. Now come to imagine about the CAA. It has nothing to do with the Indian population. We are basically giving asylum or citizenship to people persecuted in neighboring countries. And in what kind of countries? One of them is Afghanistan, where till 1893, when the Durand line was drawn, we have
1990.
2.5. no, Durand line. I'm speaking about the demarcation between Afghanistan and India, the undivided India and Afghanistan. So there, no, you see, there were some 2.5 lakh Sikhs living in Kabul alone. Kabul alone. There was a big population of the Hindus also, and the whole of Afghanistan, several lakh of Hindus would be there. And whereas it brought the situation to now, there are hardly 700 Hindu and Sikh families living in Afghanistan today. In those kind of conditions, and you get to see the stories, we get to hear the stories every day. So many Hindu girls are abducted, and there is a daily persecution. Vivek Kohli hits a century, and some poor Kohli girl is taken and she's gang raped by the Muslims. That kind of situation, want to give those people asylum, and the Muslims say, no, where is there something for us here? Why are we not here in this? Because this is actually for the poor people being oppressed there. See, this is the kind of insistence. This is the kind of veto what they want over Indian politics. No. So this minority majority, I don't think India has suffered it. Lebanon has suffered it in the past. Europe is suffering it now. And as you said, no, if we continue pandering to that, it is not good for the world.
So our time is up, and we have to, but very wonderful discussion, very deep, and also very educating also for the viewers as well. The many questions by the viewers, but I would just like to say that Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb is a sham. It's a conspiracy, and it doesn't really help anyone, and it definitely doesn't create a social harmony. And like Srila Prabhupada, the ISKCON founder, said, secularism means atheism. So I think the expecting everyone to become atheist is definitely not a sound philosophy for any governance, because
Absolutely.
even though we do accept atheists as part, Nastics are very much respected in Hinduism, but when you compare with other faiths, then Hinduism is also a religion, not just a way of life. So
Moreover, Aditya ji, yeah, just butting in for, with one point. Governments can be secular, but people can, government can force people to be secular. It is like that. But in India now, the fashion is people also have to be secular. Two Hindus on Eid wishing each other a happy Eid. This is kind of a scenario now which secularism is led us to. That is the kind of stupidity it has led us to.
well, the attraction of India to the West is not because of Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb or anything. It's purely Rishikesh, Vrindavan, Mathura, Rameshwaram, and Hampi, the places where the pastimes of of the Vedic leaders happen. Ram, these are the popular. So India is not known by all these things. These are just a conquest of India. So I think the better people realize it, and also Americans should also know that what has happened to India is going to come to US too. So and it is already here. So now there's a veto everywhere, including the dahi. Dahi has a halal marking on it. So most of the Hindus cannot offer that dahi to their gods because prayers are already done on it. So with that, we'll come to an end. Very informative. Thank you, Vikas Saraswatji, and thank you viewers for watching it. It was a long session, and do watch it on YouTube. Subscribe to it. Forward this video, and let's keep educating ourselves. Thank you. Namaskar.
Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna.